debut episode of the new MLSTalks podcast. I am your host Tom Scholes, and for the next half an hour I'll be discussing the major talking points from this past week in the world of Major League Soccer, and I'll be giving my opinions on the biggest news stories of the past week. Now, of course, this is like a new podcast, so there'll be glitches and there'll be twists and turns that even I don't expect at this point, because it's just a feeling out process. It's just, getting the lay of the land. Everybody that starts a new project or everybody that starts something new will always, come up with something that, on paper, seems like a good idea. And this, for me, when I was sitting at home, I just finished, another project which I'll get into later on, was I needed something else to kind of keep my mind going and something different to challenge me into, put another string to my bow. And I've written things and pieces, books. Not plural, because I've only done one, but you never know, there is another one lined up that I've got working out. And also, I just finished university as well, so there was parts of it that needed improving. There were parts of myself that I needed to, challenge myself with. And I thought, I'm a 21-year-old upper working class white male. What's the one thing that we all do? Create a podcast, which is exactly what I'm trying to do here. Only this time, it's not necessarily like other podcasts that you'll see. It's just me ranting, and this is giving me a platform to rant and just get my thoughts out in a way that writing wouldn't. Writing gives you, to an extent, it gives you a platform to do it, but you have to be coherent. You have to be straight to the point, not waste the reader's time. Whereas with this, while you don't also waste the time of people that are listening, you can stop and you can think things over. Of course, on the spot, but it's a bit more natural. It's a bit more. I try to make it more of a conversation when I do things like this, and it's things like that right there, where I can take a gap and think of what I'm saying, and obviously not losing dead air. But the point of this podcast, the point of MLS Talk, will be to get my thoughts out about, what's happened in Major League Soccer in the past week or so. This plans to be a thing every week. Hopefully every Tuesday is what I want to do with it. Again, the song you heard at the beginning, Machine Head, Bush, it's one of the songs that people know. People may not know who did it or what the song is, but everybody's recognised it, and I do think that it's a good song to have. But then at the same time, I don't know if I want to keep it. So that's the fun that I'm going to have with this, where it's, you don't know what's going to come next. You don't know what you want to change. You don't know what you want to do differently to anybody else, or whether you want to do something different from your last episode. You don't know whether people are going to listen. You don't know whether people are going to enjoy it. And I think one thrill of this is certainly the aspect of you don't know whether people are going to enjoy it. And you've got to challenge yourself, one, to make it interesting for yourself and to be able to give you the motivation to come back and do it again, but also to get people who don't know you and who aren't necessarily familiar with you, get them involved and get them listening and get them coming back. And I think that's just as important as, talking about what happens in the week or previewing matches that have happened. I think that is one of the things where everyone tries to do a podcast, but not everybody does it properly. And I think, you can tell when people have written out scripts for it, and you can tell when people have got something to work with. With this, my idea of it I'll tend not to write too much about it because I want to get my thoughts out. And this week, it's been a good week of MLS soccer. And it's been entertaining. There's been no shortage of talking points. And of course, the main talking point is, I'll just jump straight into it. And the headline from bbc.co.uk reads, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Nedum Onuoha accuses LA striker of disrespect. Now, of course, the big story here is that the LA Galaxy played Real Salt Lake over the weekend. They had a good game. They're two good teams. Zlatan scored a 78th minute winner, and what he did was he celebrated in Nedum Onuoha's face. The former QPR and Man City guy, he didn't take it too well. And Zlatan, at the end of the game, went into the RSL locker room. He went to Onuoha and he apologised, and it's been made publicly and he's made well aware by Onuoha himself that he didn't accept the apology from Ibrahimovic. So I'm just going to read out what the BBC put on this, and it's ex-Manchester City defender Nedum has claimed Zlatan Ibrahimovic threatened to hurt him during LA Galaxy's victory over Real Salt Lake and accused the striker of disrespect. The pair clashed twice before Ibrahimovic scored the 78th minute winner and celebrated in Onuoha's face. Onuoha, 32, says he rejected the Swede's apology in the dressing room. Over here, it is just a show for him. A lot of people are scared of him, but he is just a mere mortal, he said. First, he was very arrogant. Secondly, I thought, what is this guy playing at? This is not the way you're supposed to do it, especially someone who is meant to be the face of the game here and the game globally. I wasn't a fan before, and I'm definitely not a fan now. Now, the flashpoint, as the article continues to go on, the first flashpoint came in the 60th minute when Ibrahimovic was booked for dragging Onuoha to the ground by his neck in an off-the-ball instant. You look on the video of it, the clip of it, it is quite bad. Now, of course, the second incident is I think Zlatan was shouting at Onuoha's face, and he was trash talking him. It was no different to what you see in NBA and NFL and anything like that. So on one hand, one incident you can look at and go, okay, I can see why he wouldn't accept the apology. Why on earth would any human being want to grab another person by the neck and grab him down? Or at the very least, if you're going to try to defend Ibrahimovic, it's the top of his shoulder. Either way, it was an unnecessary act, and it didn't really need to happen. Whereas the second one with the goal, where he's shouting at him, he's screaming at his face, it's trash talk. It's not sportsmanlike. It is unpleasant from a soccer point of view. In football in Europe, you'd never really see it, and when you do see it, it's called out, and people, rightly or wrongly, depending on your opinion on it, say that it shouldn't happen. We had an incident in the Sky Bet Championship when Leeds and Aston Villa, where an Aston Villa player went down. Leeds didn't kick the ball out, or they acted like they were going to kick the ball out. They played it to one of the defenders for Leeds, played it to the winger for Leeds, cut inside, he scored. A whole controversy about that, and Leeds, under Marcelo Bielsa's instructions, then let Aston Villa score to equalise the game. Now, that's an incident where there is rules for it. Leeds weren't in any right to kick the ball out. There was no rule stating that they should kick the ball out, because at the end of the day, it's the referee's decision. The referee's decision relies on whether it is a head injury or not. If it is a head injury, then kick the ball out, or the referee stops the game, and it just stops there. Everything is gone. But what happened with the Leeds team was they were under no obligation to kick the ball out. They weren't really told that they had to kick the ball out. But when you signal to kick the ball out and you play on and then you then score, that does leave a bit, salt in the wound, so to speak. But with what Ibrahimovic did was slightly different, because he was screaming at Onuoha's face, and he was, as Onuoha said, he kept saying, you know what, I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to do you, you just watch, there is enough time, I'm going to do you. You don't mess with me in the game, you don't mess with me. Now, Ibrahimovic then went to say that I went to shake their hands, there was no real big issue, and it's just strange, because trash talking and getting into an opponent's face, personally, I wouldn't do it, but I think it would be, it's acceptable. It adds a bit of drama to it. It isn't sportsman, it probably isn't necessarily in the rules, but I can understand, one, why people would say it's okay, and on the other hand, why Onuoha would be a bit effed off by it, because you don't want anybody screaming in your face, especially what Ibrahimovic has allegedly said, and when someone is imposing as Ibrahimovic, you certainly don't want that. But where it comes is what Onuoha said about him, whereas the amount of disrespect he showed me on the field, I want to let things go, but I can't let them go, especially when it's so raw. The way he came in was almost arrogant in itself, trying to be all friendly. But this is the guy who failed me on the field. Tried to embarrass me when they scored, and then comes into it to try and allegedly apologise. I do not think he is a good person, so I'm not going to offer my hand, and in no certain terms, I told him to get out. I can understand that. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a massive fan of Ibrahimovic. I'll defend him till the cows come home with his time in Europe, with his time with PSG, where he's essentially a flat track bully, but anybody worth their salt that goes to PSG and has the talent of Ibrahimovic or any other top talent in the world that goes to play for PSG, they're going to end up being a flat track bully. That being said, his behaviour here, especially for the second incident where he's screaming at Onuoha's face, It's not on. It's wrong. Simple as. Should he get banned for it? If there's precedent for it, yes. If there isn't, maybe a fine. Because MLS is being called into question here. MLS is being called into question simply because they've made, whether they willingly did it or not, they've made Ibrahimovic the star and the face of the league. Of course, when you have someone that is as famous as Ibrahimovic, when you have someone that is as talented as he is, that is charismatic and is so easy with the media, it's almost impossible for him not to become the face, if not one of the faces, of your respective league. He did it when he was in Liga with PSG. He did it in Serie A when he was with Juve, Inter and Milan. He's done it everywhere he's gone. Even with Manchester United when he was getting old and he wasn't as productive as he was in supposedly, the toughest league in the world, he still managed to create headlines. He was still effective to a degree, and he was still a massive talking point. Now, that being said, what MLS has to do here, they need to lay the law down, and they say it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what your standing is, if you act in a certain way, and if you bring the game into disrepute the way that Onuoha certainly feels that Ibrahimovic has, there has got to be something done. Now, the problem that MLS has is Kaku of New York Red Bulls kicked the ball into the face of a fan when they played Sporting KC the other week. He's been banned, I think it was 3 games. 3 games for kicking the ball into a fan's face, whether it's intentional or not, is a, it's not the better look for him, to put it in one way. You could argue that 5 games minimum for what is essentially assaulting a fan. In some people's minds, that is assaulting a fan. That's one way to look at it. On the other, Kaku implores and he pleads that he never meant it. He never meant to hit the fan in the face, but he still got his ban, which, that's how it should be. It doesn't matter whether, if you take the player's word for it, then nothing ever gets done. Because if Kaku got away with that because he said he never meant it, the next time someone does something, oh, well, I never meant to do this, I never meant to do that. It opens up a can of worms, and it just makes everything just a little bit greyer in MLS when it needs clearing up a little bit. This, with Ibrahimovic, is an incident that gives MLS the chance to lay the law down, and it gives them a chance to almost, establish themselves as a tough league. Not in terms of the technical ability or talent or anything like that, but in terms of the NBA would fine a player if he did something where it was disrespectful and it was rude, and if it was threatening in the way that Onuoha certainly feels that Ibrahimovic was. The NFL have their own problems that are seemingly never-ending, yet they'd have no trouble finding someone if they were acted in a certain way that was akin to this. I'm sure Major League Baseball would as well. If MLS allow Ibrahimovic to get away with this simply because of his name and because of his standing and because of how important he is to the league, because let's not get away from the fact he may be quite old and he may not be at his peak anymore, whether it be technically or physically, but he is still important to this league. Because a lot of people are aware of the LA Galaxy because of him now. When a few years ago when Beckham left and they were in that bit of that transition period between Beckham leaving and between Ibrahimovic coming, when Keane was still there and Donovan was in and around it and Steven Gerrard come in, there was a little bit of a tension, but it was always, oh, well, at least they had Beckham a while ago. Whereas with the arrival of Ibrahimovic, they feel relevant again. Especially at a time when LAFC are staking their claim to be one of the top teams in MLS. More people could side to them because they are taking more attention to the league now. But that's why Ibrahimovic is important. Simultaneously, that's why MLS need to bring the law down. Because if they want to treat him like the league, the face of the league, if they want to make everybody look at MLS and go, look, we're fair, we treat everybody the same, we have this level of parity that every league in North America craves for. Personally, I don't agree with it, but that's a topic for another time. Ibrahimovic is a big name. Ibrahimovic is the biggest name in MLS. He's the face of MLS, but he's not above the law. and it needs to be done. And MLS and the powers that be and whoever make the decision, they need to investigate this, and they need to give him some sort of fine, maybe even a ban if what he said was worse than what Onuoha said, because bearing in mind Onuoha was saying this to the media. He was saying this to the reporters, so I'm sure that if he was going to use the language that perhaps Ibrahimovic or anybody might have used in that situation, certainly by the look of their face, I don't think he'd be using every cuss word that's going. So there needs to be an investigation about it, and if it does turn out that what Ibrahimovic was saying was threatening and offensive to an extent, and I'm not suggesting anything there, but when I say offensive is, for example, not to put words in anybody's mouth, but if a player went to another player and said, "I'm going to kick your head in and I'm going to kick your eyes down your throat," or something horrible and something offensive like that, ban them. Because there's no place for that in this sport. You can trash talk all you want. You can say that I'm better than you, I'm quicker than you, I'm stronger than you, and you can't defend me. That's fine. Because that's, it's probably not sportsman to the full extent of the word and full extent of the phrase, but it's trash talk. It happens every week and every day in the NBA, because that is the personalities they've got. It's fine to trash talk, as long as it's respectful, as long as you can back it up, and you're not made to look like a complete clown at the end of it. Ibrahimovic, allegedly, we always have to say allegedly with this, because even though we can see by his reaction, he certainly wasn't saying, "How are you doing, Nedum? How's everything going? How are you finding life in MLS?" With the scowl he had on his face, he's clearly saying something aggressive. And you wouldn't put it past someone like Ibrahimovic and the personality and the character of he had to try, as he would see it, to get into the mind of the opposition. Some people would say he's just doing what he can to win. This is the argument that people used to say about Roy Keane, where on one hand, filthy player, dirty player, not a fair player. On the other hand, he did what he needed to do to win. Graham Souness. We've all seen the grainy footages of him jumping in 2 foot into tackles. We've all seen what he does and what he's done before. But he had the excuse of he could hide behind, well, not hide behind, but he could have the trophies to back it up. He could use the saying of he was doing what he could do to win. Ibrahimovic, on one hand, probably thought he was doing what he could to win. The difference is, the two examples I use there are from a completely different generation. They're two players that, if they were playing now, would never get a game. Not because of their ability, not because of their talent, not because of the teams they were playing in, and certainly not because of their mentality. But because of their mentality, would get them sent off and banned every other week because of the tackles they'd made and the things they'd say at other players, and possibly even the referee. There's no place for it in this world. In 21st century, 2019 sporting landscape, there is no room for a Roy Keane or a Graham Souness or anybody with that character and anybody with that trait. And if you do have that trait, that winner-takes-all, must-win mentality, everything like that, that Ibrahimovic, I'm willing to bet, has, you've got to be careful. Because people like Nedum Onuoha won't take it, and he'll stand up to it. And as he says, he's a celebrity in this league. Zlatan is a celebrity in this league. Zlatan is, to some people, he is the league. But he's not above the law. He's not above the rules. He's not above sanction. And when someone stands up to him, it probably takes a bit out of him. Because he's so used to coming out and saying he's a lion. He's so used to going on all the television programs and, essentially doing the marketing for MLS for themselves. By the way, there's a piece I wrote on Medium the other day about the media coverage in MLS and how it's all geared towards Zlatan. And I understand it, being someone that rates him as a player and is enamoured by some of the things he says. Some of them, not all of them, because some of them are cringy and some of them are tongue-in-cheek. Don't get the feeling this was, though. MLS's media is portrayed entirely, or seemingly entirely, on Zlatan Ibrahimovic. I understand it because he's a big name. I understand it because he probably brings the most attention in. Certainly from Europe, but there's a lot of other people that bring a lot of attention in elsewhere. Cough, Carlos Vela across the road in LAFC, cough. All the players at Atlanta United. There are players around the league that could do a good job marketing, but for some reason, not just for some reason, for an understandable reason, Zlatan is at the forefront of that. I have no problem with him being at the forefront of that, as long as he acts like a league ambassador, as long as he acts like someone that has the league on their shoulders, and doesn't act like a disrespectful player that is shouting insults at another professional. Because that's what it is at the end of the day. If you did... Look at the clip again, or both clips of him dragging Onuoha down and shouting at Onuoha. If you did that in any other walk of life, and I hate to compare this sport and any sport to any walk of life because it's nigh on impossible, but if you were to act and shout at someone the way that Zlatan shouted at Onuoha for the second goal and the winner, you'd be sacked. You'd be sacked from your job, you'd be arrested, probably, and you'd have a world of pain. Because you've acted irresponsibly, you've acted childishly, and you've acted in a way that makes it look embarrassing. If a grown human being acted like that, you'd be laughed at. And there's no reason why Zlatan shouldn't be. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure everybody is entertained by what he has to say. I'm sure everybody enjoys the quips he comes out with and his goals. And of course, the football side of it. He is brilliant. Even at this level, he is superb. But he can't continue to act this way, and he can't continue to act like this is his playground, because there are people out there that would kill to be in his position, that would act in a more professional way, and he's coming up against players that, with all due respect to them, he's miles better than them. Miles better than them. He knows it, they know it. It doesn't need to be disrespectful. And I think that is what the crux of it is. It's disrespectful to start off with. The content of what Zlatan said is what would decide the punishment. If he has said some horrific things to Onuoha, and if Onuoha did bite his tongue in the post-match interviews and didn't use the language that we used, and to put it bluntly, if Zlatan was swearing and abusing him and threatening him, fine him, ban him, don't do what you need to do. Set a precedent for this and show that you're not scared of the biggest personality in your league. Because if you look at this, if MLS looks at this and decides to do nothing about it, people are going to look at it and they're going to be thinking the same thing as Onuoha. They're going to be looking at it and thinking, well, they're not going to do anything. Why aren't they going to do anything? Is it because of who he is? Is it because of his standing? And there will never be a public admission of this, but yes, it is because of his standing. We all know it's because of his standing. We all know that Zlatan Ibrahimovic is a huge name, as we've said time and time again. But MLS is so desperate for attention and so desperate to have the eyes of the world on it, it probably wouldn't even consider banning its star player and its poster boy because it would lose marketing, it would lose revenue. And from a business point of view, I understand it. But the amount of respect that people are going to lose for the league if they don't do something about this, provided they do a proper investigation, and provided that some horrible things have been said, fans are going to look at it and go, well, when we play the Galaxy, ain't no point trying to stop Ibrahimovic, because if he does anything to your player, no one's going to do anything about it. The players are going to look and go, well, he's just said this, and he's acting this way. There's no point in telling anyone, because he gets away with it. Coaches, well, you can't go near Zlatan. Why? Because if you challenge him, he'll shout at you, he'll call you a name, and he'll say that he's going to kick you in, and he'll either get you sent off, or he'll win. So there's no point. But if they set the precedent with this, and unfortunately for MLS, they did such a bad job of banning Kaku for a prolonged period of time, that if they were to ban Ibrahimovic for 3 games, hypothetically, then you'd get people that would say, well, Kaku kicked the ball into the face of a fan, and he only got 3 games. Zlatan Ibrahimovic said a few nasty things and gets banned for the same amount of time. And this is the problem. But at the same time, whilst there is a problem with this, and whilst things do need to change, at the same time, something needs to be done. Ban him for a game. Fine him a month's wages. That may seem harsh, but when you are as big a player as he is, sometimes it's harder. The bigger you are, the harder the fall. And I think that applies with this one almost entirely. Do I think he should be banned? If he said horrible and offensive things, absolutely he should. If he's threatened to beat up another footballer, and another player, ban him. Ban him for as many games as you can for foul and abusive language. Because what message does that send out to the rest of the teams, the rest of the fans, the rest of the players? And then lower down, what if there's a child out there that's playing, Saturday soccer or Sunday soccer, and he's shouting and acting the same way Ibrahimovic does it because he saw Ibrahimovic do it and he got away with it? And if he's going up to another soccer player in his local league, and it's just kids, like a 10-year-old who's screaming and shouting at the opposition, and someone says, "Why are you doing that? That isn't the way to act." Well, Ibrahimovic did it, and Ibrahimovic got away with it, and Ibrahimovic is great, and Ibrahimovic won the game. And that's the problem. And that's the danger that they've got with this. They dealt with the Kaku thing, rightly or wrongly. They gave him 3 games, but they banned him. And that's what they should have done. Ibrahimovic, something needs to be done. He needs to be reprimanded, provided he's done what Onuoha's alleged. And if that's the case, then ban him. Do what needs to be done. Because if you ban him, it'll do well for the long term. If you don't ban him, it will hurt you long term, but people won't realise it until it hits them. Until you get kids, until you get fans shouting and abusing people because somebody else got away with it, because that's what enables a lot of these people, that when you hear something and you see something that is 9 times out of 10 a bad thing, but that one time someone gets away with it and someone doesn't get reprimanded for it, they're going to start acting like it and they're going to be empowered to do it. A child is more, of course, a child will do a skill that they've seen a player do. I remember when I was young and I was growing up and everybody wanted to be Ronaldinho because they saw him do his skills and they saw how much fun he had. But nobody ever talks about the influence that the negative things have. Everybody loves John Terry and he was reprimanded rightly for what he did. But then at the same time, Montenegro fans racially abused England players in a recent international friendly. They've been fined. People are still going to do that because the sanctions haven't been hard enough. If you fine Ibrahimovic pennies, it's not going to be worth it because he will come out and say, "I'll make that back in a week. I'll make that back in a month." He'll make a joke out of it. But if you ban him for a couple of games and he comes out fighting, people will take it seriously. People will take it seriously, and it needs to be done. Something needs to be done. There needs to be a proper investigation. There needs to be something said to Ibrahimovic, and he needs to sometimes he just probably needs to calm it down, because when he was growing up, and when he was younger, things were probably different. Things were probably different, and that was fine back then. But in 2019, in the world that we live in, you just have to be careful with what you're saying. And I think Ibrahimovic needs to know that he needs to be careful. And credit to Nedum Onuoha for not shying away from this and not being scared by the figure that is Ibrahimovic. He should be commended for coming out and calling out bad behaviour. But then if it happens again, someone else needs to stand up and do the same thing. And if it happens again, and MLS have let him off for it, then something needs to be done with them. Because once is bad enough. Getting away with it and doing it a second time is even worse. So now we move on to the final selection, the final part of this podcast, and it's one that I want to just keep routine. It's one I want to do every week. It's one I want to make a habit. I want to make it a segment. I want to make it stick. And this is, I'd call it the lock of the week. I think that's what I'm going to call it, or rather, no, picks of the week. Picks of the week, because I can't settle on just one game. And picks of the week is going to be where I look at the MLS fixture list for this coming weekend, and I pick the games that I'm interested in, and I think that you should be interested in what to look out for. And of course, we start on the Saturday, because on the Saturday at 7 p.m. GMT, Greenwich Mean Time over here in the United Kingdom, it is New York Red Bulls against the LA Galaxy. We've spent so much time talking about the LA Galaxy this episode and today that I thought we may as well carry it on and pick their game, but in reality it is a big game for both sides, because if the Galaxy can go to New Jersey, if they can face off against the Red Bulls and get 3 points, it's a big 3 points regardless of what position the Red Bulls are in at the moment. Speaking of which, the Red Bulls will be looking at this, and they will need to carry on the run they've ended their winless streak, and they need to carry that on. And it would be a massive, massive win for them and for Chris Armas, whose job has been in question recently with the whole Thierry Henry nonsense debacle, made up thing, I don't know. But his job was called into question, and it did raise a few eyes towards the job that was going on in the Red Bulls. And I think it's important as well to realise that they've still got some good players there. And Red Bulls without Lukaku, because of his ban, it'll be a different proposition. But you never know. If they can pick up some points against the Galaxy, it would be massive for them. Another one to look out for would be the Dynamo versus FC Dallas, because they're two good teams. They're two teams that are playing very well, but at the same time, you don't really know who's going to pick up what. You don't really know what's going to happen with either side, because you look at the Western Conference, and they're separated by a point. But Dynamo have 2 games to handle them in this early stage, and they've only lost 1. But then, on one point, I'm looking forward to the game. They're 2 good teams, they're 2 tough teams, but Dallas have only scored 9 goals in 9 games. Dynamo have only scored 8 goals in 7 games. So it is going to be, to put it politely, if you're sitting here expecting it to be a 3-3 or a 2-2 even at Desmond, then I'd be shocked. Another game, by the looks of it, I'm just going through all of the fixtures, but I promise you I'm not, because but one of the best things about MLS is each game seemingly these days has a big story towards it, and these next 2 have potentially massive stories in them, because Orlando City face off against Toronto in Orlando, and I think a win for Orlando, as if results went their way, they'd go into 3rd in the East. But I think it would be a good test for them to face off against the Toronto side, who are currently, at the time of recording, 4th in the East. And if they were to beat them, I think it would be a big sign of the improvement that's gone on down in Florida. And I think it would be a good testament to what the turnaround from last season, when they were so abysmal, to now where they seemingly have the big impetus with Nani in the team. They seem to be enjoying themselves a lot more. But also, the same applies to Toronto. They were poor last season. I think a lot of people seemingly forgot the drop-off they had from a record-breaking side that broke the record of points for the Supporters' Shield, that was then broken by the Red Bulls. They won MLS Cup, and they were the first team to do a domestic treble. Obviously, they had the Canadian Championship as opposed to the US Open Cup, but it's a treble to treble no matter what competition you play in. They dropped off massively last season. They got rid of Giovinco this year. They brought in Pozuelo this season, and he's been one of my favourite players to watch. And it seems that even though they've played 7 games, the joint lowest in the East, along with Atlanta United, who seemingly don't have a chance at the moment, and they're looking so far off the pace. But Toronto, they're a fun team to watch. They've got a lot of goals in them, both scoring with 19 goals, the most in the East. And I think it might be it's the joint second most behind LAFC and level with Sporting KC in terms of goals scored. But defensively, they've conceded 13 goals, which is only one less than FC Cincinnati, who are 11th, who I thought were doing a lot better than they were, but I think the run that they were on following their early defeats has kind of blinded a few people in what they can do in their expectation. That's an interesting game because it gives us a lot of idea and a lot of look into what the playoff pictures and some of the playoff teams might be towards the end of the season. But another game that gives us that look is Montreal hosting NYCFC, because a lot of people are criticising NYCFC for how they play, and it seems a bit uninspiring, and Dome is under pressure, and personally, rightly so. I do think a lot of things need to change at NYCFC, and forget the stadium talk. This is purely on the pitch. It doesn't seem to be clicking as well. Maybe it is now. Maybe now that you have time together, they've gotten over the fact that Villa's gone. They've got their new players embedded into the team. Maybe they start to pick up some results. Looking at the table now, they've played 9, drawn 6, and lost 1, which, and won 2, which isn't terrible. But some of them wins should have been turned. Some of them draws should have been turned into wins. Whereas Montreal, I think, have surprised a lot of people because they're second with -2 goal difference, which is always a fun stat to see. But they're level on points with DC United at the top of the East, and I think they've surprised some people because not many people had them down to do anything this season. They were they were hot and cold last season, at times, and I think that's indicative of how they are. Sometimes they can be hot, sometimes they can be cold, but they've sustained the hotness, so to speak, at the start of this season. They look like a very good team. Moving on, obviously LAFC versus Chicago Fire. LAFC are the team to watch in terms of entertainment this year. Watch them whenever you can. It's 3:30 in the morning here in the UK, at 1 a.m. on Sunday in America, Monday morning in the United Kingdom is DC United hosting Columbus Crew. That is potentially a big game because if DC United can get another win over a playoff rival or a team that are looking to be in the playoffs, then it'll only emphasise what people already think, that them and LAFC are perhaps the two best teams in MLS as it is. But then we move on to 2 a.m. Monday morning here in the United Kingdom, and that's Sporting KC hosting Frank de Boer's Atlanta United. Now, this is a good game anyway, but when you throw in the fact that De Boer is under pressure, some players at Atlanta FC aren't clicking. We saw what PT Martinez was like when he got subbed off. Childish, maybe. Show that you cared? Maybe so. Personally, I'm going to side with the former because you're a professional footballer, a professional soccer player, a grown adult. You shouldn't be throwing a strop when someone says you aren't doing your job well enough. But they're coming up against the Sporting KC side that really, they could be doing a lot better than they are. They're currently 8th in the West. They might be below that by the time they actually play against Atlanta. But then at the same time, a win sees them move up into the playoffs ahead of Real Salt Lake. And this #narrative is here to be seen by everybody. I think Atlanta United got their win last week. They'll be high, they'll be bouncing, they'll be full of filled with a lot more confidence than they already are, or certainly more than they were anyway, because they couldn't seemingly get any lower. But they can't afford another loss, because another loss only empowers the critics more, it only brings on more criticism. More people start to question De Boer, more people start to question the players and the people at the club, whether it's the right decision, who should be sacked, should they get rid of this person, blah, 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 who's coming in. All this nonsense can be put to bed with a win for Atlanta United, especially against a good Sporting KC side, and they might not find a better time to play them, because if Atlanta United win, then it puts them closer to the playoffs, which is where they should be, really, given the budget and the players they have. I just think it's fun to see. It's fun to see how it's all going to pan out. It's fun to see how it's all going to work. I can't imagine there being too many shocks this week, but this, just judging on paper and look at the teams that are going up against each other, the teams that are in the positions they're in MLS, in the East and the West, and the stories that can be told and the stories that can be made with these fixtures, this is a great weekend of football. A great weekend of soccer. You will hear me slip up every now and again. I will slip up because I'm so used to one way and I'm trying to get used to the other, because my personal feeling is if you're talking about American MLS and American football, so to speak, you have to say soccer. If you're talking about European football or the Premier League, La Liga, football. Talking about MLS, soccer. It's in the name. It isn't Major League Football, it's Major League Soccer. And this week of Major League Soccer is looking very interesting. There's a lot of good teams, there's a lot of good players out on show pitting against each other. It's going to be fun to see how it works out. I, for one, can't wait to see how it does pan out. It's going to be fun, as it always is. And I think that will do it for this round. I think the first episode of MLS Talks is in the books. It's done. Hopefully I didn't rabble on as much. I'm looking at the time. It's 40 minutes. I only intended this to be half an hour. But it's been fun. It's been fun sitting on my own, looking at my computer, researching all of this and ranting to myself. Probably no one's going to hear it, but if you do, thank you very much. I've been Tom Scholes. You can follow me on Twitter at _Tom Scholes. My book, Stateside Soccer, The Definitive History of Soccer in the United States, is available from July 29th in the United Kingdom and early October in the United States. You can find it on Pitch Publishing website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Amazon America, Amazon UK, Waterstones and WH Smith's, and all good bookstores. All good bookstores will be selling it. If you're not selling it, why? It should be on there. Hopefully you'll think it's a good book. But it is available to buy soon. This has been MLS Talks. I've been Tom Scholes, and thank you very much for staying with me.